6 foods that were once kitchen staples are now becoming luxuries that millions of American families can no longer afford. And if you think inflation is slowing down, what's happening in grocery stores will shock you. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal exactly which everyday essentials are disappearing from American tables, the hidden forces driving these changes, and what this means for the future of food security in America. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your grocery bill keeps climbing, despite what politicians are telling you. Welcome to Food Fixer, where we uncover the truth behind America's changing food landscape. If you want to stay informed about what's really happening to your food supply, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more eye-opening content. Picture this. You walk into your local grocery store with the same shopping list you've used for years. Chicken for dinner, cooking oil for frying, cheese for the kids' sandwiches, some fresh apples, a box of pasta, and peanut butter for breakfast. These aren't luxury items. They're the foundation of American family meals. But something has changed. That $50 grocery trip now costs $85, and you're staring at prices that don't make sense. This isn't just your imagination, and it's not temporary. Across America, a quiet revolution is happening in our food system, and it's forcing millions of families to make choices they never thought they'd have to make. Let's start with the most shocking example. For decades, chicken has been America's reliable protein. When beef got expensive, families turned to chicken. When pork prices spiked, chicken was there. It was the democratic protein, affordable, versatile, and always available. But that era is ending. Major producers like Tyson have deliberately cut production, citing feed inflation and labor shortages. But here's what they're new. Telling you, this isn't just about rising costs, it's about strategic decisions that prioritize profits over accessibility. The price of chicken feed has exploded because corn and soybean prices have skyrocketed. Droughts in the Midwest have devastated grain crops, while global demand has pushed prices to unprecedented levels. Meanwhile, transportation costs have surged due to high fuel prices and driver shortages. The result? That reliable $5 rotisserie chicken you used to grab for a quick family dinner now costs $9 or $10 in many urban markets. But the real tragedy isn't just the numbers, it's what's happening to American families. Parents are doing mental math in grocery aisles, calculating whether they can afford protein for dinner. Children are asking why chicken nuggets aren't on the menu anymore. Families are turning to cheaper, less nutritious options, and sometimes skipping meat entirely. This has become a political flashpoint, with debates over environmental policies and corporate consolidation, but for families struggling to put food on the table, these debates offer little comfort. The protein crisis is just the beginning. Let's talk about something even more fundamental to cooking: oil. You probably don't think much about cooking oil. It's just there, a background ingredient that makes everything else possible. But this invisible staple has become a visible sign of economic strain. The war in Ukraine has been devastating for global food supplies, and cooking oil is one of the hardest-hit casualties. Ukraine was a leading exporter of sunflower oil, and when that supply disappeared overnight, the entire global oil market shifted. Suddenly, everyone needed canola oil, soybean oil, and other alternatives. But here's the problem. America's own oil production has been hammered by droughts and poor harvests in the Midwest and southern states. The very crops that produce these oils, soybeans and corn, have been struggling with climate disruptions. Add rising fertilizer costs, supply chain delays, and uncertainty around federal subsidies, and you have a perfect storm. The impact goes far beyond your kitchen. Restaurants and fast food chains, which rely heavily on oil for frying, have raised menu prices or completely altered their cooking methods. Families are stretching bottles of oil further, reducing fried meals, or desperately seeking alternatives. Even generic brands, once the reliable budget option, have become noticeably more expensive. What was once a $2 bottle of vegetable oil now costs $5 or $6, forcing families to rethink even the most basic cooking methods. Now let's talk about cheese, America's comfort food. Whether it's melted on a burger, sprinkled on pasta, or sliced for a sandwich, cheese has been a fixture in American meals for generations. But that comfort is becoming a luxury. Cheese prices have risen sharply across the board, making even basic cheese-based meals more expensive. The dairy industry is facing a perfect storm of challenges. Drought conditions have reduced grain yields, making it incredibly expensive to feed dairy cows. In California, the nation's leading dairy producer, water shortages have forced some farms to downsize or close entirely. Energy costs and labor expenses have pushed production costs higher at every stage of the process. And because cheese requires refrigerated transport, high diesel prices and a severe shortage of truck drivers have made distribution increasingly costly. The result is double-digit percentage increases in cheese prices with no relief in sight. That simple comfort meal of mac and cheese now requires a budget calculation. Grilled cheese sandwiches have become a luxury. Food assistance programs find that cheese consumes a disproportionate share of benefits, and food banks report almost no access to dairy donations. For many families, cheese is no longer a given in the fridge. It's a luxury that's harder to justify and sometimes simply not available. But perhaps the most devastating change is what's happening to fresh produce. Fruits and vegetables, the foods we're told to eat more of for our health, are becoming luxuries that many Americans simply can't afford. While grocery store shelves may look full, the prices attached to basic items like lettuce, apples, tomatoes, and berries are forcing consumers to make impossible choices between nutrition and budget. California, which produces much of America's fresh produce, has been hit by years of drought, followed by devastating floods and storms. Crops have been damaged, production limited, and costs passed directly to consumers. Water restrictions mean fewer acres are being planted, creating artificial scarcity. Florida's citrus industry has been decimated by hurricanes and pest-related diseases. Even importing produce from Mexico has become more difficult due to border delays and diplomatic tensions. The human impact is staggering. Apples that once cost $1.29 per pound now approach $2.50. A head of romaine lettuce can cost nearly $4. For families on fixed incomes or food assistance, fresh produce is often the first thing to be cut from the shopping list. In rural and urban food deserts, it may be completely unavailable. The cruel irony is that the foods we need most for our health have become the foods that many Americans can least afford. Children are growing up without regular access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Parents are choosing between medicine and produce. The long-term health implications of this shift are profound, but for families struggling to make ends meet, future health concerns take a back seat to immediate survival. Let's move to something that might surprise you. Pasta. For generations, pasta has been the ultimate budget meal. When money was tight, families could always count on pasta to stretch a meal without stretching their wallet. Spaghetti, macaroni, penne. These weren't just foods, they were financial lifelines. But as 2025 progresses, even this most basic staple is becoming unaffordable for many families. The culprit is the durum wheat harvest. North America and Europe, the key producers, have faced extreme heat, drought, and storms that have devastated yields. Less wheat means higher prices for manufacturers who have passed these costs directly to consumers. But manufacturers have also employed a sneaky tactic called shrinkflation. They've reduced package sizes while keeping prices the same or even higher. That 16-ounce box of pasta is now often just 12 ounces, meaning families are paying more for less. Even generic brands are feeling the pressure, making it incredibly difficult for large families and those on fixed incomes to stock up like they used to. Food banks, which once relied on massive pasta donations to feed their communities, now report severe shortages. Community programs that used to distribute thousands of pounds of pasta per month are struggling to keep up with demand. Trade policies have made things worse. Tariffs and trade friction with countries like Italy and Canada have contributed to higher import costs. What was once a reliable, affordable meal has become another item that forces families to recalculate what they can afford to bring home. The psychological impact of losing pasta as a budget option cannot be overstated. It represents the erosion of one of the last reliable, affordable meal solutions. Finally, let's talk about peanut butter, perhaps the most unexpected victim of this food crisis. For generations, peanut butter has been the ultimate dependable food. Long shelf life, kid-friendly, versatile, and affordable, it's been a constant in American pantries, a reliable protein source that families could count on. But as of mid-2025, even peanut butter is no longer immune to the inflationary pressures reshaping the American diet. States like Georgia and Alabama, major peanut producers, have seen dramatically smaller harvests due to fungal contamination called aflatoxin, which thrives in the hot, humid conditions that climate change has made more common. Rising production costs for fuel, labor, and packaging materials have pushed prices higher across the board. A massive recall by Jif, one of the major brands, created a supply vacuum that smaller producers simply couldn't fill, leading to even tighter availability and higher prices. The ripple effects are everywhere. Public schools, which relied on peanut butter for affordable, nutritious meals, are completely reassessing their menus. Food banks report severe shortages and rising demand for alternatives they don't have. For families living paycheck to paycheck, a jar that once cost $2.50 seeds can now exceed $5. That's not just a price increase. That's a fundamental shift in what families can afford to keep in their pantries. Consumers are switching to cheaper spreads, carefully rationing peanut butter or skipping it entirely. Parents are diluting peanut butter with other ingredients to make it last longer. The shift may not be as visible as empty shelves, but the long-term impact is just as serious. One of the most basic, dependable items in the American diet has become yet another example of how rising food costs are reshaping daily life. What we're witnessing isn't just inflation. It's a fundamental transformation of the American food system. These 6 foods represent the foundation of American family meals, and their increasing unaffordability is forcing families to make choices that were unthinkable just a few years ago. Parents are skipping meals so their children can eat. Families are switching to processed, unhealthy alternatives because they're cheaper. Children are growing up without access to fresh produce and adequate protein. The political responses have been inadequate. While leaders debate environmental policies, corporate consolidation, and trade agreements, millions of Americans are struggling with the immediate reality of empty pantries and impossible choices. Food banks are overwhelmed. Schools are cutting nutrition programs. Communities are creating informal food-sharing networks just to survive. But perhaps most troubling is how this crisis is reshaping American culture itself. Food has always been central to American identity. Family dinners, holiday traditions, the simple pleasure of a home-cooked meal. When basic ingredients become luxuries, these traditions begin to disappear. Children grow up with different food memories than their parents. Families lose the shared experience of cooking together because the ingredients are too expensive. The path forward requires acknowledging that this isn't a temporary crisis. It's a new reality that demands new solutions. Communities are developing local food networks. Families are learning to grow their own vegetables. Schools are teaching children about nutrition while struggling to provide nutritious meals. These grassroots efforts are admirable, but they shouldn't be necessary in the world's wealthiest nation. The challenges facing the American food system are complex, involving climate change, global conflicts, corporate consolidation, and economic inequality. But they're not insurmountable. What's needed is a recognition that food security is national security, that access to basic nutrition is a fundamental requirement for a functioning society. As consumers, we can support local farmers, advocate for fair policies, and build community-based solutions. But we also need to demand accountability from leaders and corporations who have allowed this crisis to develop. The quiet revolution happening in America's grocery stores is about more than just rising prices. It's about the erosion of security, comfort, and tradition that defines American life. The next time you walk into a grocery store, remember that every price tag tells a story. Behind the numbers are families making impossible choices, children going without proper nutrition, and communities struggling to maintain the food traditions that bind them together. This crisis didn't happen overnight, and it won't be solved overnight. But by unaffordable, understanding the forces at work and demanding better solutions, we can work toward a future where no family has to choose between putting food on the table and paying the bills. The American dream has always included the promise that hard work would provide for your family's basic needs. That promise is being tested in grocery stores across the nation, and it's time to fight to restore it.